Okay, welcome back to another video. Now, I have filmed this specific video, about, I'm gonna say 3 times now, 3 proper times, and each time I've run into a certain issue. The first time was complete audio input-output issues that I had to try and address, and I couldn't, do so efficiently. The second recording, sorry, I had filmed this entire video and then realized I had not been recording the actual content you can see right in front of you, the tier list on tiermaker.com. So this is hopefully going to be our best shot, and we will see how we go. I am using my Blue Yeti, but I've toyed with the settings a bit for this specific video to try and make sure it's good without it creating any issues for me. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. Now, just before this video goes underway, I'd just like to say that, of course, these are my opinions on which killer. These are my opinions. So every ranking you see here for each of the killers in Dead by Daylight at the moment are my own opinions, and as such, they are 100% subjective. Feel free to debate me or contest me in the comments, but know that as these are my opinions, you cannot bash me or harass me for choosing or ranking certain killers in certain ways, certain positions, just because you disagree with it. That would kind of be hypocritical, because you would think that your opinion is superior to mine somehow. But just, keep it civil. As I said, these are my opinions, so feel free to disagree with me, but just remember, at the end of the day, that I have the right to my own beliefs. So, just before I start ranking the kills, I'm going to put these out in my own categories. Now, these have changed every time I've recorded, but the basic gist of it is that these are the bottom D tier I put as nearly unplayable. That's for the killers that I just find, why would you, they're so difficult or so painful to play to the point where you just really have no reason to play them. That was the E tier. Sorry, the D tier is poor. We have decent, so permissible in some situations in the C tier. And B, you have your good, so your pretty damn good killers that most players, even newcomers, won't have a problem with. Up here you have your what the hell just happened there? Sorry, you have your exceptional category, and at the very top, your Hall of Fame / the best of the best. So I'm gonna call it why did I say Hall of Fame? Hall of Fame. So, without further ado, let me get this underway. I would like to say that this is, of course, a tier list created by someone on this platform as of the 5.0.0 PTB Resident Evil release, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And as such, there will be no Cenobite / Pinhead here. But even with that, I will be keeping in mind recent patch notes / reworks we've had in certain killers like Nemesis, and I will be discussing the viability of killers as of our recent full game-wide, platform-wide release. So don't fret, I will not be I'll not be limiting this to that PTB release. This will be as of the 24th of August over here in Australia, 2021. So yes, now let us begin. First up, we have Trapper. That will not come as a shock to any of you. Trapper is falling under the nearly unplayable category. And my basic reasoning for this is that Trapper is essentially, fundamentally, an M1 / RT trigger, killer, sorry, RT trigger. He is very, not even hit and miss. He's a killer that is so bad to the point where there is almost no reason or viability to playing him. Now, while there are good Trapper players like Otstava who are able to utilize his power in such a way that can land them a 4K every now and again, even those players struggle with him just because nearly every survivor, new and old, are able to counter him in every way. Just the fact that his bear traps only inflict 1 health state, and survivors are able to escape them with little to no real threat to them. It just makes him such a just a weak killer. So while you can grab survivors straight off bear traps if you're within a good vicinity of them, half the time you're going to be lunge attacking survivors straight on bear traps. And while you are able to get maybe a couple of cycle hooks in there through him, he's just such a basic killer. And his bear traps, you start with one of them. You start with one of them without add-ons, I believe, and you have to pick them up along the map. And that in itself is weak already. You have essentially a wind-up time where you have to start finding your power across the map. And that is quite ridiculous. For a killer who is weak as it is, you have to find and then set up traps in the perfect spots, on the best loops, or the best places you think that survivors will not detect them, because traps, as you may know, are rather detectable by survivors in almost every front. I mean, even in the best grassy patches, traps can be detected by survivors in almost every tile with ease. I mean, there are very select situations where you actually even get a good trap, and even new survivors know how to counter Trapper. It's basically just play the game, do gens. Sure, with certain builds he could be slightly viable, but right now he is just one of the weakest killers, if not the weakest killer in Dead by Daylight. Conversely, next up we have Wraith, who, in light of recent patches and such, I have put him in the exceptional category. Now, we have to keep in mind that Wraith, while he isn't absolutely overpowered, like some Spirit and Nurse, he is able to still do that whole silent bell. He has that silent bell act to him, where he's able to sneak up on survivors with ease, completely displace them, force them off gens, and he's such a good cycle hooker. And if you don't know what I mean when I say cycle hooker, it's just the ability of a killer to really just cycle between hooks. So not having to rely on tunneling to get kills, being able to utilize the 12 hook scenario rather well if played in the right way. And Wraith really does that in almost every regard. He is very utilizable, if that is even a word, I believe, by your most basic to your most professional killers out there. He is extremely accessible by new players and very forgiving for the downfalls of I don't even think of the word, old killers alike. He doesn't have much of a real learning curve to him. He's a very basic killer, but even with that, he has a very high skill ceiling that, even like I said, when old players make mistakes with him, there is little to no consequences of that. He is able to quickly impose his presence on survivors, and I find that very exceptional. That's why he falls into the exceptional category. He is a very map manipulative killer, in my opinion, just able to sneak around and get easy hits and downs with that little speed boost he gets after he uncloaks, which, to me, with certain add-ons, can be one of the most powerful powers in the Dead by Daylight killer rosters at the moment. Akin to that, we have Billy, who I'm putting in the exceptional category. I myself have had a very good experience with Billy since I moved over to Xbox recently. While I haven't played many matches with him, and while I haven't been playing actually that much on Xbox anyway, I haven't been playing the game as much as I maybe should be, he is a very good killer. While he isn't as accessible as, say, Wraith, he is able to traverse the map quickly with his chainsaw, and while he does have a steep learning curve to the turns of his chainsaw and the basic gist of getting easy downs on survivors with his chainsaw sprints, he is almost better in every way to his brother from another mother, Bubba, as he is able to track down survivors, which Bubba falls down, has a downfall in. I'll explain that later. But he is just so welcoming to new players that, after like couple of matches, you can really get a grasp of his power, and you can turn it into just a menacing force against survivors. And he is able to, just like Wraith, impose his presence on survivors halfway across the map. His chainsaw sprints, while you have that that cooldown after you've revved the chainsaw for too long, he is very welcoming to all sorts of players, and he is not he's not one of those killers where his learning curve doesn't really have any benefits. Once you learn how to play him, you could be looking at like a really good like main that you could be playing to the end of time, because I've seen a good few bunch of very good Billy players at the moment, and in light of recent patches and his namely his recent rework, I believe at the end of last year or the start of this year, with him and Bubba, he has become a force to be reckoned with certain perk builds, especially with his own perk Tinkerer. He can be a formidable threat. I mean, put Pop on him and you've got Pop Tinkerer. Damn, goes good on a lot of the killers, but Billy is just really damn good, in my opinion. Next up, this one will not come as a shock to anyone. Nurse is in the Hall of Fame. No real reasoning, no real contestability to this one. Nurse is absolutely overpowered. While she has a ridiculous learning curve, one can actually learn how to play her blinks really well and very efficiently, just within 5 matches of removing add-ons from the picture. Like, if you hop into, like, say, 5 matches with no add-ons and just learn to play her blinks raw and without interruption, within those 5 matches, you could seriously create this environment for you to be playing Nurse on a regular basis. I haven't had any experience with her on Xbox thus far, but she's always been one of those kills to me that just has remained a consistent, solid threat to survivors since her initial release many, many years ago, and she is just a powerful killer whose power does have that learning curve, like I said, to it, but once you learn the ropes of her power, she is just a formidable threat to survivors. She becomes a real nemesis, no pun intended, I hate Nemesis, we'll get to that, but she becomes just, a nemesis to survivor objectives, and she's able to get easy downs, and she can be quite good at cycle hooking as well, once you get a grasp on her. So, for that, she has no real downsides to her, honestly. She's up in the Hall of Fame. Next up is Michael. Michael is tough. I'm going to put him in the poor category. Oh, yeah, no. He's remaining in the poor category. The reason for this is, as you all know, Michael is a very basic killer. I mean, you start off at tier 1 and you have a significant weaker presence than your average M1 killers, who aren't even good in their own right. You have reduced attack lunges, I believe. You have you're basically just an M1 killer who's been stripped of most of your basic abilities. And the only way to increase that is to stalk survivors for an extremely long time to reach tier 2, when I believe you finally get a basic killer lunge attack range, and you become just this stealthy boy. And while he is the original stealthy boy, tier 3, I see, it just doesn't provide as many benefits as I think it should for the amount of wind-up it takes. I mean, 1 minute of being able to insta down survivors isn't very good to me. And while, yes, Myers can be used when in the right hands in a very proficient way, as a general rule of thumb, he is a very weak and underwhelming killer who, despite being the original licensed killer of Dead by Daylight, he is just a very painful, agonizing killer to see both played and to play yourself. I don't see him as very fitting to most killer playstyles that are emerging right now in the meta. So even in a casual play environment, I feel like Michael is very poor at his job of being the stealthy boy. Next up, we have Hag, and this might be a bit controversial, but I'm going to put her in front of Nurse, just for the fact that I have had a ridiculously good time with her. In the limited 3 games I've played with her on Xbox so far, she has been a force to reckon with. She is able to set traps up in strategic ways and instantly teleport to survivors and impede their objectives and just get free hits, free downs, and cycle hook at a ridiculous pace. I mean, I'm not condoning tunneling, although, as Spookendrix puts it, you're allowed to tunnel. I mean, go for it. It's a legitimate strategy, but how can we use her in many ways? She's an efficient tunneler. She's good at camping. I mean, you can put like 8 traps around a hook, and then survivors are stuffed. But I mean, pair her with the right add-ons. Like, I've been toying around with her brown and yellow add-ons. You can have like some of the yellow ones, I don't remember what it is, you can have you can moderately increase that effective phantasm trap range and just really be a menace to survivors, because there's no way for them to avoid the traps besides crouching. And if you have tabs on a hook that you're proxy camping, which again I wouldn't condone, but yes, you can really just force survivors to leave some others on hooks, which really forces them to gen rush. And if you get enough people on hooks and you really place your traps right, you could be looking at very few gens done minutes into the game, and you could have 2 dead within maybe say 5 minutes. And she's very accessible to new killers, and despite that hard difficulty rating on the menu / killer roster screen, she is very accessible to new killers. She does have a slight learning curve, but she's kind of like Freddy in the regard that her teleports are very easy to attune to. Next up is another controversial one, I believe, Doctor. Doctor is going in front of Billy for me. Oops, I don't know why that wouldn't work. And this is just for this, based on my own experiences. I've mained Doctor since I moved over to Xbox, and he's just such an accessible killer for new and old killers alike. While he does, like Hag, have that hard difficulty rating on the screen, that is absolutely bullshit by my calculation. He is calculation. That's the wrong word. Anyway, he is so accessible to new killers. He is able to impede on survivor objectives extremely efficiently. His madness doesn't take that long to get used to. I mean, the effective shock therapy range in itself is pretty insane. Even that cone shape is still a menace to survivors. And once you get a hang of when to use his static blast, which you can get done with in a couple of matches, he's a real threat to survivors young and old. He's a very, very efficient killer. He is a very balanced and consistent one in that he's able to oppress generators, force survivors into unruly chases, and really just cycle hook in a way that I have never seen many other killers do so well. And maybe besides Oni, he is just a very good killer in that regard, and I would recommend him to nearly everyone to give a try. I mean, if you struggle with his powers somehow, you have Maple Knight, which is a brown atom, which you can find consistently in your blood webs, and that shows you the range of shock therapy. But I only used such add-ons my first couple of matches, and after that, you have just this kill that you're able to use whenever you want to BP grind or something, because he's so consistent. And while I do see that he's underwhelming in some regards, and the fact that some survivors can get the better of him under certain circumstances, I won't elaborate too hard on that. He is pretty consistent in every regard, as I said earlier, and for that, he's in my exceptional category. I mean, I have really no complaints besides that. Next up, maybe another controversial one, Huntress in the good category. Now, this is just because I've had one game of her on Xbox thus far, and it was against a bunch of toxic flashlight spamming survivors, Swift, who, after I had constant freezing and lagging because I'm on a last-gen Xbox console, of course, I was having a rough time with her. I did land 7 good hatchets across the lane, more than 7, but 7 good hatchet shots. I landed about 2 cross maps, which was really good for someone who's had very limited experience with Huntress. That was actually my first game with her. I had a rough time with her in general because of that freezing, of course. I had 1000 MS. I think I was put into a North American games, a server game or something. Somehow, I don't know. But even given all that freezing and those lag spikes, and I was being teleported across the map, I had a ridiculously fun time with her. She feels so accessible. I mean, her hatchets don't have that hard of a learning curve to them. You do have to be pretty precise with them, but just like Deathslinger, I mean, you can get a real good grip on her early on. And for that, she is put in the good category, but yes, just because based on my own experience, she doesn't fit into that exceptional category by my book, so we'll leave her there. Next up, everyone's favorite, Basement Bubba. And Bubba goes in front of Huntress, just because I've had one or two games with him recently. I just bought him the other day alongside Demo and Pyramid, PH. Is a very, very good killer. And as here, the menu screen, as the roster screen suggests, he's a very easy, accessible killer for new survivors. I mean, everyone knows that barbecue, he comes to barbecue, which is arguably one of the best perks in the game, but I ran a 2-perk slot game with him the other day and got a 4K easily. You know, I wasn't even basement bubbering. I did basement hook twice, but, I mean, just running tier 1 barbecue and iron grasp was enough for me to easily down survivors, keep them on hooks, and just traverse, halfway across the map with terrible hook spawns, and he's a very consistent killer in that regard. As I said earlier when I was explaining my placement of Billy, he does have a downside in that his tracking skills aren't as great, but if you look past that, he's a very good killer for new killers and old killers alike. I find that he's able to manipulate survivor objectives, and even if he can't do that successfully, the easy downs on his chainsaw are just ridiculous. I mean, I think he might need some fine tuning. If I'm being honest, he's quite good, and for that, he's in the good category. Next up is Freddy. I'm putting Freddy just behind Nurse in the Hall of Fame, and this is because I have had a ridiculously good time with Freddy. I have not had, maybe I've only had like 1 or 2 bad matches with Freddy where I didn't get as many kills as I should have, but he's been a pretty consistent killer for me. I've somehow pulled 200 survivors into the Dream World, as per my Xbox achievement, unless that's wrong somehow, but in my limited playtime with him, maybe 20 or 30-ish, maybe 20-ish games, I have done that many Dream World pulls with him, because he's just that easy. I mean, the Dream World itself is a real threat, but to survivors' objectives. But even then, when survivors are not in the Dream World, I mean, if you have one in the Dream World, you can fake dream projections to really catch survivors off guard. You can use projections to cut off chasers and end them short, and just like get easy downs from survivors. And if you run certain add-ons like Red Paintbrush, Eerie Paintbrush, you can use to it wasn't Eerie, sorry. You can use to keep have survivors in the Dream World at the start of the game, and you can force them to wake each other up and find alarm clocks, because with that paintbrush, for starters, you have an add-on that doesn't allow failed skill checks to wake survivors up, and that's a real threat. And even with add-ons, he's ridiculous. I mean, with add-ons, actually go back to add-ons. Class Photo is a ridiculous purple add-on. You can dream projection to any gen you want as usual, but while you can't cancel dream projections and you can't fake them with Class Photo, every generator spews blood when you dream project, and your projection doesn't climb out of the generator until you arrive there, which really just makes him a force to be reckoned with. And with add-ons or without them, he is a consistent killer who I feel really needs some attention, some awareness to his current overpowered state, because he is so accessible to new and old killers alike, just like Doctor, but to the point where that hard difficulty rating on the roster screen is absolutely misleading. He's such a good killer, and I recommend him to everyone. Next up is Pig, who comes just behind Myers in the poor category. I have not had a game with Pig. I am about to play my first one very soon, but she's very weak. She has 4 unreplenishable traps, standardized. Of course, you can get more with add-ons, but her traps are very easy for survivors to remove. You could place a trap on them, hook them, and then as soon as they're unhooked and a gen flies, they have the trap off within 30 seconds because they've found the ability box right near the hook after they are unhooked. And that's really pathetic. I mean, even though the traps instantly go off when survivors try to escape with them, only your really, really bad survivors are going to do that, unless they forget, and she's just very weak. She does have basically a pure undetectable status while she's crouching, and she's able to ambush survivors pretty well, but besides that, her power is ridiculously weak. I mean, she needs urgent attention. She's been very weak for a very long time, and while I've heard many people say that she's a fun killer to play, there's no viability to play her in any meta or casual play environment right now. I mean, she is just behind Myers because I feel like Myers has some advantages over her in the stealth category. I mean, she's meant to be the best stealth killer, and she's really not. Now, I don't have much more to say about that. She's really not good in my opinion. But next up is Clown, Jeffrey Hawk, everyone's favorite fat boy. He's just behind Trapper. No, actually, he's in front of Trapper. The recent rework to him, I feel, was pathetic. It was pointless. His bottles already do little as they are. I mean, you could barely cut off loops, and they don't really impair survivor vision at all. He is able to anti-loop in the right hands, like with Starver, who is able to play Clown in a pretty proficient way. But just as a general rule of thumb, adding that speed bottle just allows survivors to escape that loop easily. I mean, I've seen very restricted gameplay of Clown, and in light of those recent nerfs, I call him nerfs, other people call them buffs. I find him to be just a very weak killer, but of course, he's not 100% an M1 killer, so he's definitely in front of Trapper in that regard anyway. Next up, this one is uncontestable. Spirit comes up in first in the Hall of Fame. This is a killer that I refuse to play or purchase because she is just broken. I mean, run any add-ons with her, run no add-ons, it doesn't matter. If you just try, you can almost get a guaranteed 3k against any form of survivor team, Swift, solo queue, whatever. If survivors aren't keeping tabs on you 100%, you can phase walk, catch them off guard, get free downs, cycle hook through survivors at a ridiculously fast pace, and I found her to be absolutely overpowered in every department, and she needs urgent attention because a killer should not be that blatantly broken. I mean, even your worst spirit can easily impede survivor objectives, and it shouldn't be that easy to just use a killer and just basically force survivors off gens just by playing. I mean, you could be playing for fun, not really doing anything, and you'll be noticing you're getting easy hooks, easy downs, with little to no problems arising while doing so. I mean, sure, you're not always going to be getting 4Ks, you're not always going to win, you might lose a couple, but as a general rule of thumb, Spirit is absolutely ridiculous, and for that, she's in the Hall of Fame, and disagree with me where you want, but I don't think that is a contestable belief. Okay, next up we have Legion, who I am going to put in the poor category. We're going to put him in the poor category in front of Pig. Now, Legion is a killer I've also had very restricted experience with, but very limited experience with, but them, I usually forget there's multiple of them somehow, but Legion are they're just killers who, they're just teenagers with adrenaline coursing through their veins, really. I mean, most survivors at this point know just don't mend, and Feral Frenzy becomes pointless. You become an M1 killer again, and survivors just remain injured, and you're unable to down them with your power. You are just running around like a dickhead and getting nowhere with it. I mean, sure, you can vault pallets, and that's cool. You can kind of act like a survivor, I guess, in that regard, but there's really no benefit to playing Legion unless you just want to have a fun time. No viability in meta whatsoever. Don't try and argue with me on that one. I find that to be a unanimous opinion held by the community. Just a ridiculously poor killer who is unable to impose really any effects on survivors because their power relies on the fact that survivors will heal, and that really doesn't happen when you're facing a Legion. Most survivors from yellow ranks onwards will know not to mend, and that really just makes Legion a very average M1 killer. And for that, in the poor category, of course, it does have some upsides in the fact that you're able to rush pretty fast, but that's just a poor category, honestly. And now, our first decent let's put Plague in the good category. Just behind Huntress, I find Plague to be a very easily accessible killer with a good power to keep survivors injured, and unlike Legion, she can actually down survivors with her power even though it relies on survivors cleansing at those pools of devotion. But let me tell you, Corrupt in itself is very accessible. I mean, good players like Ots are able to use Plague in a very efficient way, keep win streaks up, go see some of that gameplay. But even newcomers to Plague will know that she is a very reasonable killer with a very low learning curve. She does have a decent skill ceiling as far as I'm concerned. She's able to efficiently keep survivors on edge, and she can force them off gens pretty easily, and when on the right map, she can be a real menace / nemesis to survivors. Again, no pun intended, but she is a very consistent killer on every front by my count, and to overlook the fact that she is one of the most unique powers today, I will feel that Nemesis does rip some of her powers off in some ways. She is a very, yes, consistent killer, and for that, she ends up in the good category. I have had a decent experience with her in my time, my career in DBD, I guess you could say. Not very much career. So, but yeah. Now, Ghosty. This is a killer who I've had fractured experience with. Maybe not on Xbox, I'm not too great with him, but I used to be extremely good. It's not toot my own horn, but I used to be extremely good with Ghosty, and I want to put him in the good category, but he's really in the decent category. While he does have a good stealth factor, and he's able to really play mind games with survivors pretty well when you, moonwalk / crouch behind loops, and you're able to really sneak up on survivors and gen grab pretty efficiently. Against a good Swift or against a good team who've had experience with Ghosty, you're going to be getting exposed left, right, and center, and you're almost forced into this M1 killer position where you'll get the occasional down and you'll be able to cycle hook, but will you really be coming out with that draw or that win? Because survivors will really know how to oppose you in every department, and for that, it really does make Ghosty a very basic killer, and for that, I will be putting him in decent. I mean, fight me on that all you want, but I find him to be a very hit-and-miss killer who has his offs and his good moments, but as a general rule of thumb, he is very inconsistent, I guess. Next up is Demo. Demo is a killer who I've had an exceptional experience with since I got him, as I said, with Bubba and Pyramid Head. I am putting him in the exceptional category because he is just so fun, and I would almost call Demo the best cycle hooking killer in the game. You are able to map manipulate in such an accessible way using his portals. You are able to anti-loop with his shred when you use it correctly. You are able to just be a real menace / nemesis to survivors just by using your basic attacks as well. And I just find him to be a very consistent killer on all fronts, and it is very sad that we are losing Demo for newcomers to the game this November or September, whenever it is, and I'm so glad that I picked him up while he was on sale, because Demo is such a fun killer. Even if you don't have a great game or you never play him very well and you're always losing, Demo is such a fun killer, and overlook the rank system, the pathetic rank system. He is he's exceptional. That's why he's in the category, right? He is phenomenal. I love him in every way. He's such a good boy, Demo. What a great girl. Oni. Now this is hard. I'm gonna put him. Let's put him in front of Wraith. Now Oni is one of the most consistent killers in the game. I have had no experience with him in my time playing the game, but he is the killer. Between him and Deathslinger, I am choosing to purchase my next Eerie purchase. I find him to be ridiculously good by most gameplays I've seen, and even if you don't get constant wins with him, he is a very good killer and a very exciting, thrilling one to play from the experiences I've heard of consistent Oni mains. Apparently there are not too many Oni mains out there as well. We really need to get that up, guys. Oni is just a very fleshed out killer in that his power is easily accessible once you get around to learning it, and it does have a slight learning curve to it, but unlike his Billy counterpart and other sprinting killers, you are able to turn corners with his power, which is just ridiculous in its own right, because you're not constantly colliding with obstacles, you're not losing your power to walls, and while you do have to rely on injuring survivors, you can pulp blood out of survivors very, very efficiently, and even against the best Swifts, he is very good at insta-downing with his Cannibal, with his Demon Strike, and his Demon Dash just allows him really, it provides him with very efficient map traversal, which I find makes him a rather consistent killer, and for that, he's in an exceptional category. He's very, very accessible. Next up is Caleb Quinn, Deathslinger. I'm going to put in front of Ghosty in the decent category. Decent in that, while he is very rewarding once you get to learn him, his relatively little learning curve and his high skill ceiling are also extremely difficult to achieve. Against the right teams, you will be facing bad games, constant losses, and while he's arguably the best in the 1v1 scene, and he's able to pick off survivors willy-nilly and just dwindle away at their gen rushing forces, able to slowly kill them. Maybe he's one of the best cycle hookers besides Demo. He's just pretty inconsistent, and just being better than Ghosty, he has a very hard time against good survivors. And actually, now I'm thinking about it, I'm going to put him in the good category, just at the end behind Plague, because in the right hands he can be a formidable force, but he of course does have those downsides, as I said, to the point where, especially on console, you'll be having a hard time using his power without problems. So for that, he's in the good category. He's a very power-dependent killer who requires you to have good experience with FPS games, which a lot of us have anyway, but yes. Next up is PH. PH goes in the Hall of Fame. No, he's going in front of Doctor in the exceptional category. PH is another killer who I've had a ridiculously fun time with. He's just like Demo in that he's fun in almost every aspect, and while you won't be getting consistent wins with him, because he does have a rather high learning curve, he has a ridiculously high skill ceiling as well by my count, and he is able to, with his Cages of Atonement, really subsidize on those hooks and cycle through survivors efficiently, and his Trials of Torment are in themselves just a very efficient tool at locating survivors and keeping them on edge as you force them off gens and just range attack them using your Rights of Judgment. I find that to be a very powerful tool, and there's really no downsides to him in that he does have that learning curve. So for that, he's in the exceptional category, just in front of Doctor. Next up is Blight, who is unarguably a very efficient killer. In fact, I'm going to put him in front of Freddy. Blight is actually one of my mains as well. I haven't been playing him as much recently, but I've had such a consistently fun time with Blight, and I've just gotten better and better with him, and I do have my off seasons, but Blight is such a fun killer, and even on console, with the right add-ons, you are able to really hit turn hits and curve shots very well, and I find him to be a very menacing killer who is able to impede on survivor objectives, really traverse the map efficiently, and manipulate the map to bend it to his own will by lethaling and just getting free hits on survivors who are unsuspecting of your presence. I mean, with the right perk build, he could be one of the best killers, arguably better than Spirit, just for the fact that while he does have a very steep learning curve, once you get the grip on his lethals, he is just a ridiculously good killer, able to sprint across the map extremely fast and just force survivors off gens and regress gens with certain perk builds very efficiently. He's able to keep tabs on survivor objectives, and I find that to be very good. And for that, he's in the Hall of Fame. He's a very consistent killer in my eyes. Next up is Twins, who I haven't had any experience with in my own right, and I don't plan on having it, but as per most people's experiences, I'm going to put them in front of Bubba in the good category. twins are apparently a very consistent, mobile, dynamic duo team. Victor has his upsides. Charlotte has her upsides. You can camp Charlotte somewhere. Use Victor to get easy slug downs, and even against quadruple unbreakable teams and those ridiculously annoying borrowed time teams, you have a survivor capable of slugging Swifts efficiently with little to no downside. I mean, from all the gameplay I've seen, twins are a very, very efficient killers who I have no doubt many people will be accessing in the future, and who are just very popular in the meta right now for their ability to slug. So for that, they end up in the good category with no complaints on my side. Trickster. He ends up in the nearly unplayable category in front of Clown. My reasoning for this is that I've seen Trickster played very well by such players as Dead Plays, who you should definitely check out. Dead Plays also does a pretty mean Deathslinger, so I'll maybe link him in the description. Trickster is able to be used I guess by some players in a very efficient way, but with all the controversy surrounding his buffs and his nerfs and whatever, he's a very odd killer right now. He's both weak and good at the same time. We had a certain broken add-on combination that was recently just destroyed, severed from his playstyle, and even given his fractured state, I find that he's able to be played better than Clown and Trapper, and for that he ends up in the nearly unplayable category, just shy of the poor section. Lastly, Nemesis, the bane to my existence. He falls under the decent category just due to the fact that he is very odd. I mean, that Tentacle Strike has a ridiculously small range of like 6 meters, I believe, at like tier 2 or something. And survivors on console, and when you're playing, especially when you're playing against PC players on a cross-play match of Xbox or PS4, you are just being constantly freeze framed every time you use Tentacle Strike, and if you're not having those freezes, survivors are able to easily dodge your strikes because you are relying on them to infect them. And even with Killer Instinct being available when survivors vaccine against you, you have really no reason to be doing anything but M1 attacks, because before you charge up your tier 2, you're just giving survivors free escapes by hitting them with your tier 1 Tentacle Strike as they get that sprint boost as soon as you hit them with it. And that really annoys me. It irritates me. He is such a weird, wonky killer who has both his upsides and his downsides, and has very little room for improvement and very little room in the current meta. He can be played by some players rather well, but as a general rule of thumb, and I know I've said that a lot with a lot of killers, he is a very odd killer, and for that, he gets put in the decent category. I'm hoping he gets buffed soon. Maybe that sprint boost that survivors get on your tier 1 tentacle gets removed, or perhaps he gets a buff to his tentacle strikes overall. Maybe they deal 1 health, say, at tier 1, because right now, 3 tentacle strikes I believe it takes to even down survivors. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I mean, it almost forces you to M1 right now, and that's painful. Now, just before we conclude this, I'm looking at my my chart right here, and I want to move play down into the decent category, and I am now looking at this, and this looks a lot better for me. Yes, this is my tier list. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I'm open to debate, as I said down below. I know this is a very hollow and very vague video. I haven't really gone too much into depth on each killer, but this is probably nearing 30 minutes already now, which will be my longest video to date on this channel. So this will be very raw edited anyway. I won't be doing much editing into this video. You'll be hearing a lot of ums and ahs as per my native Aussie dialect. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video because, of course, Pinhead will be coming soon. I was working on one of those killer analysis videos, as I did back in August of last year on Blight, but that didn't go so well. I just decided to do this killer tier list in anticipation of his platform-wide release. So, thank you for watching this video, and in the future I will be doing another tier list when Cenobite is released and fine-tuned, and yeah, we'll see how my mind is changed by then. Of course, I'll be playing my first pig game very, very soon, hopefully. And yeah, thank you for sticking around. Cheers.